Reality Case Studies, Season 2, Jesse Lally and Michelle Saniei from the Valley. Episode 2, The Roommate Marriage, How Two People Can Live in the Same House and Slowly Disappear from Each Other. Emotional disengagement, financial incompatibility, and the quiet death of intimacy. Imagine you are married to someone, and one day you learn that during the hardest, most uncertain months of a global pandemic, your spouse secretly took out a loan for $300,000 and never told you. You didn't sign for it, you weren't asked. You simply find out later that the debt exists and that there is no plan to pay it back because the money to pay it back was never actually there. And then you learn something even harder, that you are so desperate to leave the marriage, so ready to be free, that you agree to pay half of that debt yourself, $150,000, just to get out. And somewhere in the middle of all of it, there's a conversation about whether there's enough money each month to cover your young daughter's health insurance. That is not a plot from a movie. That, according to what Michelle Saniei has shared, is a piece of the ending of her marriage to Jesse Lally. And today, we're going to talk about how a marriage arrives at a moment like that, because it almost never happens all at once. It happens the way most marriages quietly end, one small disconnection at a time. Welcome back to the Path to Peace Therapy podcast. If you're new here, my name is Stephanie Buckley. I'm an AMFT, parenting strategist and family systems coach who specializes in ADHD and OCD, executive functioning challenges, emotional regulation, and the patterns that keep families stuck in the same arguments on repeat. I'm also a mom to a thriving 23-year-old neurodivergent son with ADHD and OCD, and I've been married for over 3 decades. I created this podcast because I remember how confusing parenting felt when my son was younger. I remember watching behaviors that didn't make sense and wondering whether what I was seeing was attitude, laziness, defiance, or something else entirely. What I eventually learned, both through my professional work and my own kitchen table experience, is that many behaviors we interpret as intentional are actually rooted in how the brain processes stress, frustration, and executive functioning demands. This podcast exists to translate what is happening neurologically, psychologically, and relationally so that you can move from constant conflict to collaboration. I'm a solution-focused therapist who utilizes Bowen family systems theory to help people understand the patterns running through their family system. Today we continue Season 2 of Reality Case Studies, where we're following Jesse Lally and Michelle Saniei from Bravo's The Valley. In our first episode, we started at the end, with the grief of watching an ex become the partner you begged them to be. Today we rewind, all the way back into the marriage itself, to ask a quieter and in some ways sadder question. How do two people who share a home, a business, and a child slowly become strangers to each other? This is the episode I suspect will land closest to home for many of you, because the dramatic divorce is rare, but the roommate marriage is everywhere. If this is the first episode of mine you've ever found, let me tell you quickly what this series is, because the method matters. Reality Case Studies uses publicly available reality television as a teaching tool. A case study is one of the oldest ways we learn psychology and medicine. You take one story, you study it closely, and the concepts stick in a way they never do from a textbook definition alone. We use stories we all watch together because it is far easier to see a pattern clearly in someone else's life than in your own. And once you can spot it on a screen, you can start to recognize it in your own home. That distance is the whole point. And here is the promise I make every single episode, without exception. This is a case study, not a diagnosis. I am not diagnosing Jesse, Michelle, Lala, or anyone else, and I never will. A real diagnosis requires hours of assessment, a full history, and a genuine relationship with a client, and none of that exists here. I have never met or assessed anyone featured on the Valley. What I do instead is describe patterns, the observable sequences that anyone watching can see for themselves. And then, and this is the part that separates a case study from gossip, we turn every single pattern back toward our own lives. If you finish this episode thinking about Jesse and Michelle, I've missed the mark. If you finish it thinking about your own marriage, your own history with money, or the way intimacy has quietly changed in your closest relationship, then the case study did exactly what it's meant to do. Let's start by naming the thing that happens to a roommate marriage, because most people who are living inside one cannot name it, and that's part of what makes it so painful. The clinical term is emotional disengagement. Emotional disengagement is the gradual withdrawal of emotional investment from a relationship. Less curiosity about each other, fewer real conversations, less reaching for one another, until two people are running parallel logistics instead of sharing a life. Here's what makes it so hard to catch. Emotional disengagement rarely looks like conflict. It often looks like peace. There's less fighting because there's less caring. The house gets quieter, and a quiet house can feel at first like things are finally calm. But there's a difference between the calm of two people at rest together and the calm of two people who have stopped trying to reach each other. And your nervous system usually knows the difference long before your conscious mind admits it. Jesse and Michelle didn't just live together. They worked together, building a real estate business side by side, which means they were partners in the fullest sense, romantic partners, parents, and business partners all at once. And that matters because when a couple runs a business together, it's remarkably easy for the entire relationship to become all about logistics. The conversations become about clients, listings, money, and schedules. You can spend all day in close proximity to someone and exchange 1,000 words with them, and not one of those words is about how you actually are. That's the paradox of the roommate marriage. You can be constantly together and completely alone at the same time. To understand how a marriage quietly empties out, I want to introduce you to one of the most useful ideas in all of relationship research from the work of Dr. John Gottman, who studied thousands of couples for decades. Gottman found that intimacy is not built in the big romantic moments. It's built or lost in tiny everyday moments he called bids for connection. A bid for connection is any small attempt to get attention, affection, or engagement from your partner. It's your spouse saying, "Look at that bird outside," or "I had the strangest dream," or simply sighing loudly, hoping you'll ask what's wrong. Each of these is a small hand reaching out. And here's Gottman's crucial discovery. In every one of those moments, the partner does one of three things. They turn toward the bid, meaning they respond with attention, even a small one. They turn away, meaning they ignore it or miss it, or they turn against it, meaning they respond with irritation. In his research, couples who stayed happily married turned toward each other's bids the vast majority of the time. Couples who divorced turned toward each other far less. The stunning part is how small these moments are. A marriage is not usually lost in a single betrayal. It is lost in 10,000 tiny moments where one person reached out and the other, tired, distracted, resentful, or checked out, didn't reach back. Multiply that over years, and you get two people who have quietly stopped expecting each other to reach back at all. That is the architecture of a roommate marriage, built one missed bid at a time. In our first episode, we talked about the pursuer and distancer dynamic, and I want to bring it back, because this is where it actually begins. In many marriages, one partner becomes the pursuer, the one who seeks more closeness, more connection, more conversation, and the other becomes the distancer, the one who creates space, goes quiet, or pours themselves into work or hobbies or their phone. Remember Jesse's own words that we discussed last time. Every time I take 6 steps forward, she takes 6 steps backward. That single sentence is a perfect description of a pursuer and distancer cycle. Though which person is truly in which role is something only the two of them could ever know. Here's the engine that makes this cycle so destructive. The pursuer's pursuing makes the distancer withdraw further, and the distancer's withdrawing makes the pursuer chase harder. Each person's coping strategy triggers the exact behavior in the other that they least want. The pursuer feels increasingly abandoned. The distancer feels increasingly suffocated. And both of them are usually convinced the other person is the problem, when in reality they are caught in a system, a loop that neither of them designed, and neither of them can escape by simply trying harder in their same role. In Bowen family systems theory, the framework at the heart of my work, we would say the couple has become emotionally reactive to each other, each one's nervous system automatically responding to the other's, with less and less of the calm, thoughtful, chosen response that keeps love alive. There's a specific behavior that shows up constantly in fading marriages, and it has a name: stonewalling. Stonewalling, another concept from Gottman's research, is when a person shuts down and withdraws from an interaction entirely, going silent, becoming a stone wall, refusing to engage. From the inside, the person stonewalling often feels like they're staying calm and avoiding a fight. But from the outside, to their partner, stonewalling feels like abandonment mid-conversation. It communicates, "Your concern is not worth my engagement." And here's what's important to understand physiologically, because it's not always the villainous act it can appear to be. Sometimes a person stonewalls because they are flooded, meaning their nervous system is so overwhelmed that the thinking brain has gone offline, and shutting down is the only thing they know how to do. The tragedy is that whether it comes from cruelty or from overwhelm, the effect on the relationship is the same. The bid for connection dies unanswered, and the distance grows. Now we arrive at what may be the deepest fault line in this particular marriage, and one of the most common in marriages everywhere: money. Because money is almost never really about money. Money is about safety, values, identity, power, and love, all disguised as numbers. Michelle, by her account, was the more financially responsible partner, the one watching the accounts, worrying about what things cost, wanting to build security. Jesse, by his own portrayal on the show, valued a lavish lifestyle, appearances, and living well, possibly beyond what the couple could actually afford. And I want to be careful and fair here. Neither of those orientations is villainous on its own, but when they live inside the same marriage, unspoken and unreconciled, they become a slow, grinding source of disconnection. Psychologists talk about money scripts, a term from financial psychology researcher Dr. Brad Klontz. Money scripts are the unconscious beliefs about money that we absorb in childhood and carry into adulthood, usually without ever examining them. Some people carry a money script of scarcity. Money is precious, unpredictable, and must be guarded, so spending creates anxiety. Others carry a money script where money equals status. What you have and what you display signals your worth, so spending creates a feeling of safety and identity. Can you see how a marriage between those two scripts becomes a marriage between two people who feel unsafe for opposite reasons? One person feels safe when money is saved. The other feels safe, or at least feels like somebody when money is spent. Every financial decision becomes a quiet referendum on whose fear wins. There's another concept here worth naming: keeping up with the Joneses, the drive to match or exceed the lifestyle of the people around you. Underneath that drive is usually something tender, not shallow. Psychologists connect it to self-worth that has become contingent on external validation, meaning a person's sense of being okay depends on how they appear to others rather than on a stable inner sense of enough. For someone whose nervous system learned early that being admired is how you stay safe and loved, an expensive lifestyle isn't vanity, it's regulation. It's how they soothe a deeper fear of not being enough. That doesn't make the financial consequences less real, but it does help us understand the behavior with compassion rather than only judgment, which is always what we're after on this show. Now let's talk about the loan, because this is where the emotional disengagement and the money scripts collide into something with a clinical name. According to what Michelle has shared, Jessie took out a loan for $300,000 during COVID that she did not know about. When one partner makes a major financial decision in secret, hides debt, or conceals spending from the other, that has a name: financial infidelity. Financial infidelity is any significant financial deception between partners, and research suggests it can damage trust in ways that are strikingly similar to other kinds of betrayal, because at its core, it is the same wound. It says, "There is a part of my life, a consequential part, that I have decided you don't get to know about." And trust, as we explored all through season 1, is built on predictability and transparency. Secrecy is the opposite of both. Sit for a moment with the position Michelle describes being in. She learns of a $300,000 debt she never agreed to. There is, by the account given, no real means to pay it, and she is so depleted, so ready to be out of the marriage, that she agrees to pay half of it, $150,000, simply to be free. I want to name what that decision reveals, because it's important and it's something I see in my practice constantly. When a person is willing to pay an enormous financial price simply to exit a relationship, that is almost never really about the money. It's about the value they've placed on their own peace. Economists would call the money she'd already invested in that marriage a sunk cost. The years, the labor, the partnership, all of it spent and unrecoverable. Many people stay trapped for years precisely because they can't bear to walk away from what they've already put in. The willingness to pay even more just to leave is often the sign of a nervous system that has finally decided that freedom is worth more than any number. That is not weakness. In many cases, it is the return of self-preservation after years of self-erasure. And then there is the detail that, for me, as a family systems coach, sits at the center of all of this: the mention that there wasn't the monthly money to cover their young daughter's health insurance. I want to handle this carefully because we are not here to assign blame, and we don't know the full financial picture that only they could know. But I do want to name why this detail matters so much psychologically. In family systems work, we pay close attention to what happens when the stress in the couple's relationship begins to affect the child's world, because a child's sense of safety is built on the stability the adults provide, whether or not the child ever hears a word about it. Children are remarkably attuned to their environment. They may not know what a health insurance premium is, but their nervous systems absorb the atmosphere of a home. The tension, the whispered arguments about money, the stress in a parent's shoulders. This is why, in Bowen theory, we talk about the family as a single emotional system. The anxiety between two partners does not stay politely contained between them. It moves through the whole system, and the youngest, most vulnerable members often carry what the adults cannot hold. One more detail from the story deserves attention, and it's an easy one to overlook. Michelle shared this information about the loan, the money, the strain, during a hike with her friend Lally, another cast member from the show The Valley. And I want to gently point out what that tells us, because it's something beautiful in the middle of a hard story. When we are carrying something heavy, we tend to set it down with the people whose presence makes our nervous system feel safe. There's a reason the conversation happened on a hike and not across a conference table. Movement, nature, and a trusted companion walking beside you, literally shoulder to shoulder rather than face to face, all lower the body's threat response and make honesty possible. Psychologists call the calming, connecting effect of a safe relationship co-regulation, the way one steady nervous system helps another settle. Michelle telling Lally on that hike is a small picture of one of the most protective forces in human life, a trusted friend who lets you say the true thing out loud. If you take nothing else from this episode, take this. Everyone navigating something this heavy needs a Lally and a hike. Now we do what we always do in reality case studies. We turn the camera around gently toward your own life. Because the roommate marriage is not a celebrity phenomenon, it is one of the most common quiet griefs I encounter, and it rarely announces itself. So I want to offer you some honest questions to sit with, and I want you to notice, not judge, whatever comes up. When was the last time you and your partner talked about something other than logistics? Not the kids, not the schedule, not the bills, but something real. Something about who you each are right now. When your partner makes a small bid for connection, a comment, a sigh, a story, do you tend to turn toward it, or have you started, without meaning to turn away? And when you reach out to them, does it feel like they reach back? Notice which direction the disengagement, if there is any, tends to flow. And now the money layer, because it's often the least examined and most powerful. What was money like in the home you grew up in? Was it scarce, tightly guarded, a source of tension? Was it a source of status and appearance? Was it silent, never discussed? Whatever it was, you absorbed a money script from it, and you brought that script into your adult relationships. Does your money script match your partner's, or are the two of you, like so many couples, quietly afraid of opposite things? And here's the tender one. Has money ever been a place of secrecy in your relationship, in either direction? Not to shame anyone, but because financial honesty and emotional honesty are far more connected than we usually admit. Before we close, I'd like to invite you to slow down with me for just a moment. This is the Path to Peace pause, where we gently turn the focus away from someone else's story and toward our own. Here are the 2 questions I want you to carry with you this week. Question 1. In your closest relationship, when did the last real conversation happen? The kind that wasn't about logistics. And if it's been a while, whose bids for connection have been going unanswered lately? Theirs, yours, or both? Question 2. What money script did you inherit from your childhood home? Is money about safety, status, or silence for you? And how has that script quietly shaped the way you and your partner handle money together? Sit with those. Journal on them. And if you'd like to go deeper, I'd love to invite you to join me inside the Path to Peace Therapy Companion Journal on Substack. In this week's Companion Journal, we'll map your bids for connection, uncover your money script and your partner's, work through a guided exercise on rebuilding emotional connection one small turn at a time, and explore the difference between the calm of peace and the calm of disappearance. The public podcast introduces the psychology. The Companion Journal is where you begin applying it to your own life. You'll find the link in today's show notes. Think of reality case studies as the doorway. Once we've introduced a concept through a real-world example, you can continue learning by exploring the deeper episodes in my library of over 160 episodes, all linked below. If today's episode named something you've been feeling in your own marriage, you're not alone, and it's not too late. A roommate marriage is not a death sentence. It is a set of missed bids, and bids can be turned toward again, one small moment at a time. Next time on Reality Case Studies, Season 2, Jesse Lally and Michelle Saniei from the Valley. Episode 3, Team Jesse or Team Michelle. How a divorce recruits an army. Triangulation, loyalty binds, and the psychology of taking sides. One more time, because it matters. This episode is educational. It is not a psychological evaluation, diagnosis, or treatment recommendation for anyone featured, and it is not a substitute for professional mental health care. If today's themes are ones you're living, please reach out to a licensed professional in your area. You can find every episode, the companion journals, and more at thepathtopeacetherapy.com. And you can follow me on Instagram at The Path to Peace Therapy and connect with me on LinkedIn and Pinterest. Take a deep breath, give yourself some grace, and remember, understanding the patterns is the first step. Practicing something healthier is what changes the story. You got this, and I've got you.